Well, I want to thank you all for being here today because, being that it's kind of an extended weekend for some people might be taking Monday off, and so they might have a 4-day weekend. Others, they might be celebrating just on the 4th. But for a lot of people, I know they have family gatherings. I know you have some family here today, and there was great music. Thank you for sharing. That was wonderful. And so some people have families together, and they're celebrating. But whether you do it this weekend or on the 4th or both, it's a fun time of the year. Because you get to oftentimes go outside and you get to have picnics and play games, as I said, during children's time, and then watch fireworks and when it gets dark. I enjoy those things when the weather's good and allows us to do so right. Hopefully it'll be better than it is right now. But regardless, it's fun to spend time with family. And it's also a special time of the year because we're not just celebrating family, but we're celebrating something that's bigger than ourselves, aren't we? We're celebrating what many people would consider to be the greatest nation on earth. We celebrate America. America was founded on many different principles and ideas, but one of the basic ideas is that we should be free to live life mostly however we want. And in particular, the freedoms that we enjoy, there are many of them, but the two basic freedoms are the freedom of worship, or the freedom of religion, the ability to worship however we want, and then also the freedom of speech, to be able to say whatever we want, to say whatever is on our minds. And that can be, sometimes we see the ugly side of that, because we oftentimes look at the media, sometimes we see some hurtful things people say, or disrespectful things people say, and yet in America, we have the freedom to do that. We have the freedom to say whatever is on our minds, whether we like it or not. And so that's a good thing, though. That freedom is to be celebrated. We have been blessed in America. I mean, as you think about it, how many of you had to take a secret passageway to get here to church this morning? Or how many of you really seriously think the government's going to come in and take you to jail because you're here worshiping this morning? None of us worry about those things. We take it for granted that that's not going to happen because most all of us have grown up here. And so we've enjoyed these freedoms for our entire lives. We need to remind ourselves that it's not that way everywhere. That there are many places in the world where people don't have the freedom of speech or the freedom of religion. We have been abundantly blessed. That saying, God bless America, is a saying that's a little bit controversial today with the secularization of society. Oftentimes people say, well, you shouldn't really use that word too much. And other people say you should use it more. But there are two things you can be sure of. Number one, politicians are going to use it at the end of every speech throughout the year. And number two, you're going to hear it more during this time of the year, of course. Whether you listen to patriotic songs or whether it's just people say it, kind of as a celebration. And kind of like, for some people, God bless America might be kind of just a phrase like Merry Christmas, It's just a saying that goes with the holiday. For some people, it might be more of a prayer, we pray that God will bless America. But the thing is that we know that America has been blessed. We don't need to pray that God will bless America. We can pray maybe that He continues to bless America, but God has blessed America. We have been blessed abundantly. As I think about the fact that I have 2 cars. Many people in the world don't have any vehicle. And then I start to think about the number of people in the world who don't have access to clean water. And even to get dirty water, they have to go great distances to carry these heavy buckets back. And yet, as I did a mental count, you'd think I could just walk around, but I was lazy. I did a mental count of how many places in the house, in the parsonage, that there are access points where I can turn a knob or a faucet handle and get fresh water. And there's 10 of them, at least, inside and outside of the house. You should do that sometime, just fun. Do a count of how many places in the house you can get access to clean water. It'll amaze you. Many, many people die of starvation in the world, and yet I complain inwardly if my food order is taking longer than I think it should. First world problem. We have been blessed abundantly, and so the question isn't, has God blessed America? God has blessed America. The question is, how are we going to respond to that blessing? Because the truth is that God has blessed us so that we can be a blessing to others. That's how God operates. In the book of Genesis that Dan read for us, the really short scripture in Genesis. That's where Abraham, who his name at that point was Abraham, he received the first call of God on his life, and it was a call to leave his land and to go to another land, what would eventually be the promised land. And God said he was going to bless him. He was going to bless him, and then as we read on in the Bible, he goes further in the promise, and he says, I'm going to bless you with many descendants. But the idea wasn't that Abram would be blessed just so he could be happy. He wasn't blessed just so he could bask in his blessedness. No. He was blessed so that he could be a blessing to the entire world through his descendants. That's just how God works. Throughout history, we see this. And so, what that means is that if I've been forgiven of my sins, right, that's the basic belief of the gospel, is that Jesus died to forgive us of our sins. But I haven't just been forgiven of my sins so that I can be happy and go to heaven when I die. I mean, that's part of it, but that's not all of it. I have been blessed so that I then can make a difference in the world. I've been blessed so that I can be a blessing to others. And the same is true for you as well. And so we see that at work in the Bible, we see that at work in Scripture. But this type of attitude, this belief that everything I have comes from God, therefore I am to bless others, that only comes when you have an attitude of thankfulness in your life. When you believe that everything you have, not only what's been given to you, but also what you've worked hard for, ultimately comes from God, then you're more apt to share it with other people, to share the blessing with others who are less fortunate than you. This kind of attitude comes from that scripture reading in Deuteronomy that Dan read, where when the people are promised into the promised land, he said, now watch out, don't forget God, and don't forget when you settle in and you get comfortable, don't forget that everything came from God. Don't think to yourself, this is mine. Because, you see, what happens when I have that kind of attitude, the closed fist attitude, you could call it, the attitude that everything I have is mine because I earned it, and maybe I did earn it, maybe I did work hard for it, but the attitude that it all is because of me leads me to not be as thankful. Because I did it, right? Who would I be thankful for? And so I don't have a need to share it with anybody else. And that is not the attitude of Christ that Christ wants us to have. Instead, he wants us to realize that everything comes from God. That's the basic message of Christian stewardship, and yet it applies not just to our money, but to our time, our very lives. Everything that we've got comes from God. And so it's important for us to have this attitude, not only in a Christian faith, but we can take that and we can apply it to our national life as well. Now, I know, of course, that the government is supposed to remain neutral on religion, and I think that's a good thing. That helps us. Part of the freedom of religion is the ability to be able to worship God, or whatever God we believe in, right? However we see fit. And, of course, we see that more and more nowadays in modern society, with a more diverse society, where we see other religions becoming more prominent in our society, and we see that, and sometimes that makes us maybe a little bit uncomfortable, or we push back on that a little bit, but it is true that freedom of religion means all people can worship God, so the government remains neutral on that. And yet, people of faith can use their faith to influence their decisions, not only in their spiritual lives, but also in their civil lives as well. And so we can ask the question, as Americans, since we have been so richly blessed, how can we be a blessing to others? How can we be a blessing to those who do not have as much as we have? Well, that's a question we've been asking for generations, right? We're not coming any closer to getting the answers. Do you feel like when you read the news and hear what government's doing that we're getting closer to the answers? We are deeply divided in America on so many different issues because we're trying to answer that question. And people have different answers and different thoughts. And I'm not going to get into that, of course, but I will simply say that people on both sides have good reasons to believe what they believe. But whatever we end up doing as America, the key is that we need to seek to find ways to where we can bless others with the blessings that we receive. That's what God has taught us to do. And yet oftentimes we don't do that. Fast forward a little bit from Abraham, after the Israelites settled, his descendants became the nation of Israel, they settled, they started to lose their purpose. They became inwardly focused. And they started focusing on their own survival and maintenance of the status quo. taking care of one another, but not necessarily caring about their purpose of being a blessing to the world. And so then when things started to go downhill, they started to wish for the days of King David, when things were great and easy. And they'd say, oh, why can't things be like they used to be? And then in the fullness of time, Jesus comes, and he reminds them of their purpose, and he broadens their scope again to realize that they are here to be a blessing to the world. And he starts the movement called the church to carry on the mission that Israel had begun. And yet, oftentimes the church can do the same thing. We can become inwardly focused mostly on maintaining the status quo. And then when things start to go downhill, we say, oh, why can't things be like they were back then when things were easier and things worked? And yet Ecclesiastes 7:10 tells us it's not wise to ask those questions. Why were the former days better than the current days? Because the reality is the world has changed. The world has changed a lot in the last 50 years, 100 years. The world is vastly different. And chances are, things are not going to go back to the way they were in the old days. And that can be that statement can either be really depressing, or it can be energizing as we think about the opportunities that God has to work. Because here's the thing, even though the world has changed, in some ways in which the world has changed has been good, and some things have been not so good. But the thing is, God doesn't change. And God can still work in our world today. And so what the job of the church is, the job of the church is not to just hope for and pray for things to go back to the way they used to be. But instead, the role of the church is to look at the world in its present context, whatever that is, whenever that is. Look at the world in its current context and say, how can we be vital? How can we reach out, be a blessing to the world, and make disciples? And the same is true for America. It doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's an individual, whether it's a church, whether it's a nation. Our call is to do the same thing as America, is to look at the world as it is now, not necessarily as it used to be, because again, chances are it's not going back. But to ask the question, how can we as a nation, in our current context, continue to be great so that we can be a blessing to the world? That's what we need to look at as a nation. And so this 4th of July, may God bless America, so that by blessing us, God may therefore also bless the world.